Okay, my friends, let's start at the end and work our way back. Earth is nothing more than a positive, attractive source. Gravity is nothing more than magnetism. The Earth's net charge is plus 1 electron volt. So, how did I come up with that? I didn't. Millikan did and didn't realize it. He did an experiment where he decided he wanted to see how big an electron was and how much voltage it has. So he devised a scheme here to put a trap on the electron, and he knew how fast it would fall if it was just the oil drop. So what he did was he let the oil drops drop, and he just measured how fast they would drop. So then he put a charge on these oil drops. He added an electron. So what did that do? It didn't do anything until he added an electric field. What is an electric field? Electric field is just nothing more than a battery trying to push electrons, which are the negatives, up to the positive receiver to make the connection back to the battery. That's all he did. So what was the result? The negatives pushing towards the positive plate interfered with the particles that had charges on them. And when I say interfered, what do I mean by that? I mean that they would slow them down, so they would be just falling, and all of a sudden they'd slow down, depending upon how much pushback was against it. So obviously it was repelling them. So these, we assume these are negative particles that he had ionized. That means he added electrons to them. And we know that he's pushing electrons across this gap, so he's forcing these electron embedded particles to elevate. He's just pushing them. So now, what did he do? He says, well, I know how much the pull of Earth is, so I am going to do a calculation of the energy force it would take to push that electron back up and figure out how much electricity it's going to take by the mass of that electron, and how much electricity to move it. It's nothing more than a motor effect. So he's pushing an electron up, it's pushing against that particle, they float directly in the air, and when he does that, he gets a reading of how much voltage it took. So he started calculating it out, and no matter how many electrons extra there was, when he divided it out, it always came out to this big long number, which was tiny, but very long and very consistent. And he said that number is going to be 1 electron volt. And it's very, very long, tiny number, 1.62 times 10 to the minus 19th, something like that. Millions and zillions of numbers. And it is the charge that is on that electron. It's how much electron volts that has, and he's calling it 1. Well, guess what? That's what the Earth is. Because the Earth is pushing it away with that same force. He didn't realize it. He says, well, I'm going to overcome the force of gravity. Well, yes. You're overcoming it because you're pushing with a negative away. Earth is a positive, attractive source. Everything there is has negatives in them. Every single thing there is. Every single piece of matter is, in the electron-flooded world, half electrons and half protons, but is more electrons, so it's always more negative. Now, that is where the rub comes in. My claim is that light is nothing more than negatives. There is no positives. They are negative particles. They are dipoles, but still they are that net negative particle. Then you have positives, which are in the nucleus. They never exist floating around all by themselves. They will always accumulate into a resonance frequency that starts with hydrogen, then helium, and then lithium, and so forth up the line. But they only achieve resonance stability at certain numbers. So there's not just one of them and then one another one, and that'll float around, it'll be fine. No, it will not be fine. It will be radioactive. It will say, I don't do this. I can't be out here by this by myself. I have to be with 1,835 other little bits together, and then we're going to be comfortable, we're going to be resonant. That's 1,836 individual atomic particles in a nucleus, which that makes up one proton in the electron flooded world. I'll go over the whole thing. It's not that hard, really. But we know that everything has negatives, so it's pulled to the positive Earth. However, I say that there is nothing that is positive on its surface. So how do we end up with a positive surfaced Earth? Well, actually, it's not positive on its surface. It's negative on its surface because every atom there is, everything there is here has negative, like you painted it with a paintbrush. So there's negative on this, every bit of the surface, every tiny bit of the surface is coated with negatives. However, the pull of the entire Earth is positive. All right, so how could that be that we have a positive ball here? Well, it's not positive. It's flowing electricity. Earth is a motor. Earth has magnetic stripes in the ocean. I'm going to show you another little Wile E. Coyote diagram here, but what you want to remember is we're pulling in negatives, and everything there is negative. So rocks are going to come through here. Anything that is outer space is going to come through, because nothing there is not coated with negatives. And light itself is nothing but negatives. That's why it impacts and burns your skin and everything else, and it'll knock electrons out of their orbitals and all the whole 9 yards, because there's nothing more than an electron there. It really wants to get down here. Now, other stuff, it has positives and negatives, so it comes down hard depending upon how much density the matter has. It's just the way it works. Very, very simple process. Once you get rid of the neutrons, you're golden. All right, this is 3 big magnets in inverted direction in the center, and then 6 little ones in the outside, which makes up the nuclear core, virtually identical to what I'm talking about in electron flooding. No neutrals in here whatsoever. Positives and negatives. The negatives that are also like the negatives that have invaded still want to come in, but they're not allowed. They hang out in these orbitals, and then they will collect in an elegant little pattern of orbitals because they're all negative. So when I say they're all negative, they will not be able to get here because this has achieved negativity. They will not be able to touch their buddies because they're all negative. So everybody will stack up in the quantum distances. Now, the next thing you have to understand is there's going to be resonance stability for atomic particles, which means you're going to have a certain number of them before they are going to jiggle into their correct positions and become stable. Okay, my friends, I think I've somewhat shown what I wanted to show for today. I don't want to go crazy with it for today, but I have all the numbers, I can do all the isotopes, I have all the weights, I have all the changes, all the different characteristics they do in isotopes, because isotopes, hydrogen is not just hydrogen, there's a zillion isotopes for hydrogen. So, electron flooding, there's no neutrons. Case closed for neutrons. Every core of every atom is flooded with electrons until it achieves over neutrality, which means there's an extra electron or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10, and they keep the other electrons at bay in their orbitals, as shown in the tractor beam magnet. Now, particles filled the universe. The particles are filled in the universe. They're particles which are light. Light is free electrons. They're called ether. They're everywhere, and that's what we're rubbing through, and that is what's creating the flow of electricity in our Earth. We're rubbing through that ether, and that heats up our Earth. Our magnetosphere, where this magnetism is being created to protect us, is 56,000 degrees. That's just up a little high up off the Earth. 56,000 degrees. You don't think it comes down? Obviously it comes down. The harder we rub into that, the more heat will transfer down. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it stable? these are the things I like to know about the magnetosphere. We are spinning through this ether with the magnetic stripes on our Earth spinning around in circles. As we're going forward through the ether, we are a linear motor. Anybody that understands that will fully understand it. And that gives us the magnetic field, which is push of these magnetic lines rubbing against this incoming ether. Now, that gives us, well, the natural magnetic stripes make Earth a motor. So that's that. Leave it for this today. But my contention is that we are nothing more than a motor. Earth has the magnetic stripes, and you look up ocean magnetic stripes, and there's a zillion of them. Just click on images and you'll see how it works. They make these stripes around the Earth. The Earth is spinning on a right-hand rotation, moving this way through the solar system and through the galaxy. So as we spin, all of these particles are flowing around Earth, and at the vortexes of the torus at the bottom, the North and the South Pole, we are literally creating a motor, and electricity is flowing around. Now, I'm not sure about the universe as a whole. I've always seen that minus flows to positive, and one goes to the other, and they have to equal each other. So is the universe equal? I know these light particles are not positive particles, they're negative particles. So they're separated from the positive particles. Is there more of them? There appears to be. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe they're just being pulled out here and thrown out into space. Because this is positive. I know this Earth is a positive source. I know that this is a negative. All right, so maybe these are just flowing in and flowing back out, and everything just keeps a basic neutrality, but it's always in flux. It's always in flowing. Because we know that there's a North Pole and a South Pole. We know that there's aurora borealis. We know that the lines of flux move into this vortex at the top, and the same thing at the bottom. And you see these brilliant lights up here, the North Pole, as particles cascade against these moving magnetic fields, and that's what it is. That's what causes the auroras. So anyway, green is the free electrons, and that's the ether in space. They're everywhere. We're flowing this way, spinning to the right. It's always right-hand spin. South Pole is this way, North Pole is that way. We're spinning to the right, creating our magnetic field around us as we move. All right, that's it for today. We're going to be going we're going to go in everywhere. So I don't know where I'm going to hit next, but we're going to go from top to bottom. I guess we're going to start out with all the experiments and what my interpretation of the results of them are. Through the air, stimulating all of the free electrons. That is that same red laser light, now accelerated, stretched. There's the beam physical, which is obviously a particle stacking up, crushing into each other's regions, creating, this is a Venturi, creating plasma. The plasma is nothing more than particles that are invading each other's regions. The spray here is nothing more than repulsion of free electrons in plasma. They create these elegant patterns that most of them come through the center, and that is what pushes them off in these stripes. It's nothing to do with a wave. These little particles, the little white ones, if you can see them, are the ether that is in the air, and this set of lines back here is reverse EMF, is because of this enormous concussion of particles in the energy beam stream, which is from a red laser light. Now, another picture here is where it comes out the other side from that Venturi. That white particle is spinning in reverse, gathering its field. The others are displaying the right-hand rule and polarizing the ether that's in the air surrounding the boson particle, which CERN says that's what it is, creating a Higgs field, which CERN is looking for, a polarized circular Higgs field in the Higgs ocean when a charged, highly impacting particle crashes into a denser space. That's exactly what's happened here. And we also got a particle that we cannot explain. It is this particle right here, when that little white reverse spinning particle, which could be even antimatter, crashed into a Higgs field. And when I keep saying Higgs field and all these are Higgs bosons, people laugh. Well, let me tell you something. All right, I guess I'll end it with this. This is what Higgs is looking. CERN is looking for is a Higgs boson. You can see a particle, plasma, causing these fields that are surrounding these charged particles. What you have to do is create highly charged, highly accelerated particles, and then you get these fields surrounding them. Exactly what I showed. One more time. These particles are extremely energized, as you saw. They are crashing into the Higgs ocean. They are polarizing a field identical to what CERN wants. I saved a lot of money too. Alright, I was going to leave it at that, but I better do this. I'm going to show you this salt experiment. Now, this is, you should go on here and look at it, stunning salt experiment. They put it on this vibrator. Now, watch what happens. It only locks in at certain frequencies, 345, and then it goes up to 1033 or something, 1033. And then they go up in certain frequencies, and then they become stable. That's called resonance stability. In between that number and the next number is nuclear decay. So there's a couple hundred hertz where you have non-resonance. 2041, then you go up to 3240. There's 1,000 hertz between the next resonance. So I'm going to leave it at that. But it goes on and on and on. And these are the same situation as the electrons and the orbitals and the nucleuses achieving stability. In between, they can't. That is nuclear radiation. That's nuclear decay. And the only way they get in those broken up little bits is when you smash them in nuclear bombs. There is some natural radiation from radon and things like that. There's sources in the earth that do create nuclear fission. They just spontaneously decay. However, stability is achieved with resonance. Let's just go with that. Let me just add that there are things that will happen to atoms as they just lay around. They're being bombarded with this and that. They may get hit with an alpha particle. That's what causes them to pop. Whatever it is, they're on the edge, they're in an isotope condition, or there's an extra electron, or they're missing an electron. Something is going to happen to them where they want to change. When they change, then you get a pop. Something's going to be attracted, or something's going to be given off. To sum it up, sunlight is primarily electrons flooding from the sun due to extreme excitation in their orbitals, as we saw with the tractor beam magnets, and zoom, they go flying off. Now, the entire universe is filled with the particles of light, which are electrons. I have shown them, they concuss. The red laser is light. It accelerates. They are particles. They concuss. They glow. In space, they are all primarily negative particles and do not have things to concuss with. So they primarily stay away from each other but flood the universe in different densities in different regions. So, the particles coming from the sun come away and they spin, as you see. Some are bigger, some are smaller. When they interact with the moon, they re-radiate from the moon, and they cannot achieve the high spectrum colors that the primary light achieves. But they achieve a glow, a cold light. It does not excite. It's a re-radiated light, so it doesn't have enough energy to excite the molecules to their extreme colors. Blood looks black in moonlight. Now, bottom line is the whole universe is filled with particles, not just nothing, not just magnetic waves of nothingness. Nothing that's nothing does anything. It was not a correct theory. Einstein had it wrong. They say, oh, well, it's just nothing when it's at rest. Well, if it's at rest, it's nothing. When does it become something? Oh, it only becomes something when it starts accelerating. Well, what accelerated? It's nonsense. These are electrons, or they are alpha particles, which are chunks of they're like bar magnets coming out of the broken bits of atoms. That's all that is filling space, other than asteroids and comets and so forth. So the takeaway here is that space is filled with particles. That is matter. They've always been looking for dark matter. That is matter that's out here. They've never been able to come up with the agreement that it's there. It is there. It's ether. We're rubbing through it. Our Earth is heating up because we may be in denser ether. We can tell by the interaction of the sun. We can tell by the interaction of our magnetosphere. Are these things starting to get hotter in the magnetosphere? It's 56,000 degrees out there. It's millions of degrees on the corona of the sun, and on the surface only 6,000. Why is it millions here? It's rubbing through all these negative particles with the negative particles of the sun and spinning through it at the same time, and we are doing the same thing. So that is a major source of heat. I don't care what anybody says. Carbon dioxide, I don't like it, but I want to know, is the magnetosphere heating up? What was the trend? What has happened in the past? We have all kinds of problems with our magnetic field right now, so don't tell me it's not a problem with the magnetosphere. I think it's a problem with the way they look at things. They don't have an understanding of what we are in. We are in ether. And if it's denser, we are going to have a more extreme interaction. It's just like turning up the electricity. You're turning up more electrons. Identical. So there's a lot to be understood here, and it's been years that it's been avoided, just like all my other research. I had to do this. I have to do all of this stuff. I'm not trying to go outside of my realms. I'm trying to go into a realm that nobody will bother going into. I've been pushed into this. And I'll leave this the last statement. The reason I had to get into this was because I had to prove all the chemistry of the mud fossils, which they still won't accept. And I have DNA reports, specimens. I have CAT scans. I have anatomist verification. It's all certainly 100% factual. So, I mean, academia is starting to look very, very poor form at this point. I mean, if their obligation and their oath and their mission and their destination and their goal in life is to educate and to bring forth knowledge, they're miserable failures, absolutely miserable failures. All right, they are. There's just no question about it. No interest whatsoever in that community. None. All right, and you people are paying through the nose. I'm not going to go into this because this really tears me up. All right, Mudfossil University, free and real. Nuclear core. I think it might be made up of all these in blocks. That's almost like a tile on the floor or a honeycomb cluster. Minus, plus, plus, minus. It works out as like a building block. I don't know if it's right or not. I have no clue, to be honest with you. But I'm thinking it might have something to do with a right-hand spinning rule through here. I have no clue. But these are like almost tiles. And they could add here and add here. They step off one step at a time, and they can go thick and add, and I think they will make a virtual circle, as close as you can get with these little pulses. Just a guess. Alright, as far as that little hex looking thing goes, that's just total speculation. But one thing I am certain of is that that is red laser light. It went through the Venturi and got plasmatized. And when it came out the other end of the Venturi, this is what we saw after the second, shortly after it broke into these dipoles. Those are dipoles. Nobody can tell me any different. And I have a bunch of videos on these, and I'm working it out to try to figure out what the, there's all kinds of different geometry, in atomic, in atoms. In other words, there's cubic and there's hex and there's different types of geometry, and I think it's sacred geometry. And I think that sacred geometry can easily be converted into sacred numbers, and I think it has something to do, and there's people talking about Tauruses and the Torah. There's a lot of stuff that I'm going deep into, and I don't care what anybody thinks. Oh, you should go. It doesn't relate. Maybe it does. You got to get your head out of your sand and think about what you're actually seeing here, and don't shut things off. It's absolutely not the academic way. It's the way the academic way should be, is to look at this, and it's not the way it is. It's the way it is to reject everything. It's just the way it works. Demonstration of nuclear electron flooding at its maximum, an atomic bomb. What's happening here is they're crushing all the particles together, then all the electrons leave because they're the freest. They vaporize the layers of the air, and then the nuclear ball itself goes straight up in the air. It doesn't create a big thing like this. Now that is the concussion wave of the atmosphere. But notice what is happening here. This is the ground level. Everything is being pulled up with the positive mass now. Its original concussion crushing, that's what they do with a nuclear bomb, forces all these heavy particles together. There's so many negatives now, crushed into each other's regions. Same thing we did with the Venturi. You get that white light. Then you get the vaporizing. Then you get the nuclear core, which is heavy, positive. Why is all this stuff coming sucking back in? Why is it still glowing so intently up there? It's doing that because it is now trying to recapture anything it can of the electrons to rebuild its core to become not strictly positive. That's called electron flooding. And everything there is will flood with electrons. They will flood with electrons immediately because there is always excess electrons. That's the way I'm seeing it. All right, Mudfossil University, thank you all.